continue with Alexandra Turner. She is a researcher and a foresight practitioner. Alex will be talking about redefining work, social attitudes to AI's role in future social safety nets. Hi, Alex. Welcome.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for having me. And you can see my screen okay, I hope?
We can see your screen.
Amazing. So yeah, thanks so much for having me to talk today about some of my research. I've just started a PhD at Yale University and I'm looking at social attitudes to social safety nets. And it's lovely to kind of come on stage after Joseph's talk and Priyanka's talk, because I feel like they dovetail really nicely, like all together, all these topics around work and sustainability and AI. So I'm specifically talking about social attitudes to AI's role in future social safety nets. This is kind of roughly the structure of my talk, why I'm interested in researching the lived experiences and the anticipated, like how people basically, in layman's terms, how people feel about AI coming in and disrupting their work, if it is disrupting their work. I'll talk about why I got into researching that with NGFP last year. I've got some of my preliminary findings, but this is just a really kind of like a pulse check, my research at the moment, and I'd like to be able to build it out wider so we can talk about that, and then kind of what's next for my research. So my social attitudes to the social safety nets around the future of work, it was my NGFP project in 2023, but to kind of rewind a little bit before that, I am a writer and a researcher, and I've got a bit of a specialism in emerging technology and foresight and futures methods. And I had been working in a technology company that was providing kind of, we like to call it employment as a service, so outsourced HR for small and medium-sized businesses, so that they could kind of leverage the benefits of HR, but without necessarily having in-house HR or a big team. So very, very focused on the business side, but I was really interested in the social side and the kind of worker protections. And it's partly because I come from Scotland, and I mentioned earlier in the sessions this afternoon that Scotland's a wellbeing economy nation. So in theory, we should be kind of working towards things like universal basic income, perhaps, as a social safety net. Like, we're putting wellbeing first, not necessarily putting GDP and profit first, and growth. That is a separate conversation to have. But just kind of with this background of HR and technology and futures, I wrote this proposal around wanting to investigate can future scenarios help us co-create strategies for social safety nets as AI reshapes the nature of work. And the idea that it's ground up and deliberative or kind of participatory was really important to me, because I feel like in the world of work, a lot of it's done to workers and there's not enough doing with workers. So I was looking at, my question was, can we develop effective strategies to prevent citizens from being left behind as the digital divide widens, or as AI rapidly advances? And I'd set out with this idea of developing a robust and engaging storytelling framework that I would go into communities with and kind of ask them their attitudes towards work, the future of work. But as I kind of went into it, it started to grow arms and legs, became a huge project, not necessarily deliverable in a year. And I even started to think about the future of work differently. Like, the future of work is different from, or there's distinctions, should I say, there's nuances in maybe we're talking about the future of employment or the future of jobs versus the future of work. Like, these are distinct parts of the puzzle. And I find the whole thing really fascinating. So this was the project that I set out with last year. And well, how did it go? Where did it get to? I kind of immediately stumbled into the idea of social cohesion, because I think Priyanka alluded to this really nicely. Like, the workplace is just one type of community. It's like a subset of communities. And so I started to kind of broaden my research out to look at just generally what is social cohesion, with the idea that if a community is resilient, it can withstand these shocks, these kind of future shocks. not just workplaces, but all sorts of communities. And if the future of work is changing, it kind of necessarily means that the future of communities is changing as well, or it's up for change. So I spent quite a long time looking at what causes societies and communities to fragment, what brings them together, like what makes them socially cohesive. And I started to develop this social cohesion index so that if I was going to map social attitudes, I could plot it, I could find a starting point, like how can we figure out where we are on the social cohesion index. And maybe those are indicators of where we can work on to strengthen. Priyanka talked about trust, psychological safety. Like these are all like a huge part of the social cohesion index in terms of what I was beginning to see as important to what makes communities really work well together, how inclusive they are, how they communicate. And it's not saying necessarily that communities must be cohesive and harmonious at all times. It's kind of, maybe it's how they navigate conflict or how they navigate challenge and disruption. So all of this is super interesting. I ended up creating a survey. It's live. Anyone wants to take part, please please do. It's a set of questions that are really scaled back. So this is really just a prototype of the survey. And I'm looking at, yeah, as quickly as possible, because being conscious of survey fatigue, but I am interested in figuring out how people feel about work, how they feel about AI, how they're using it. So if I keep going, yeah. At the moment, it's a really small group of responses that I've got, so I feel like it's not ethical to really do like a lot of analysis on this. I'm getting good coverage around like where people work in terms of geographically and the experience that people have got that are, which is kind of what I'm looking for, is not just like an echo chamber, but lots of different experiences and reflecting. Priyanka was talking about this as well, about what their skills are and how open they are, I suppose, to retraining and how successful it's likely to be. So that's kind of where I'm at just now, but ideally I'll build this the survey out, get some feedback on it, and be looking at doing it on a bigger scale. The survey was broken down into 4 parts, looking at current, like how people rate their own knowledge and use, familiarity with AI, how they implement it, the tools that they use, and also kind of starting to get into like how they see it impacting on their current role. I was looking at understanding current workplaces, because I can't do it just now with this kind of these responses, but finding correlations between how people rate psychological safety within their workplaces, belonging, communication, social accountability. And I wanted to be able to map that or correlate that to certain like specific outcomes. Maybe we'll see what happens. And then kind of turning it more towards the future of work, and excuse me, what people are looking for, what they want to get out of work. There's a question that's missing from my survey, which I think just kind of sums up the whole thing, which is, what would you do if you didn't have to work? But even being mindful of the fact that depending on what kind of economic infrastructure or landscape a person has, like where they are in the world when I'm asking that question, changes the answer. If you're coming from like the global north, the global south, different parts of the world have got different attitudes to working, and then the future of work as well. So I'm kind of looking at what people expect to happen with AI and what they're worried about and what they're looking forward to, and kind of what the opportunities are, as well as kind of starting to get into the idea of social safety nets. But I'm going to come to social safety nets in a little minute. I think initially what I saw, I thought just everyone would tell me that we're using ChatGPT, but people were saying that they're using tools I've never even heard of. And I'm like quite proficient with AI and generative AI. But yeah, there was a real mix of tools that people were using. Most people are somewhat familiar, or they'll rate themselves as somewhat familiar. Nobody so far has said nothing, zero knowledge. And again, most people are telling me that they have got no significant impact at this point in time, whereas if there's a handful, some of the participants are, or respondents are saying, they are seeing the impact already in terms of improvements in efficiency. So starting to kind of map that out, and then looking at attitudes in the workplace. I think the thing to pull out at this stage is most people are expecting pretty much complete transformation, if not major changes. They know it's coming. So depending on where their experiences with AI might influence how far ahead they can see or how close they think those changes are going to be. And I think one of the interesting questions that I found was asking people kind of a wrap-up question of social cohesion research, I suppose, about how it's impacted their well-being. And I had this mix of responses. That some of the questions that everyone was just straight down the middle with neither nor, like not positive, not negative, just very in the middle. But when it came to overall well-being, although most people said it hadn't had an impact, I had answers both extreme negative and extreme positive. So I found that quite interesting. Where I like really enjoyed this research is kind of looking at what people are hoping for the workplace and for the future of work with AI. Kind of again touching on things that we've talked about already through this afternoon about wanting, like kind of prioritizing well-being, I suppose, if I was to really sum it up, but wanting the efficiencies that automation and AI can bring to translate directly into a better quality of life, and not just efficiency so we can do more work and we can do more profit hunting, more growth. People want well-being, they want rest, they want joy, they want flexibility in their work-life balance, different ways of working that can be accommodated with AI, like supported by the tools. And also coming up in the responses, this was like an open text, free text box, so people could just write what they liked, and I'm just summarizing here, but more inclusivity in work. And I see that as someone who's neurodivergent, disability is like a really interesting part where AI can really level the playing field, or it has the potential to. Whether it does it or not is a different matter. But yeah, these are the kind of benefits that people see as AI being able to bring, and the social environmental impact, as Joseph was talking about as well in his talk. When it came to concerns, I think privacy and data security, it's number one, and that's reflected in the conversations that we're having today, conversations that are happening at a global level around like legislating, regulating AI. But then people are also worrying about job displacement, quality of jobs, which I think isn't talked about enough. And like, what are the jobs of the future? And if we've got all this time off and nobody's working and we're all on universal basic income, like, what do we think we're going to do? It's going to go for coffee and it's going to be an automated coffee machine, or like who's doing those jobs, and what's the quality of those jobs? How are they compensated, like remunerated? So other things that were cropping up were the potential loss of creativity and empathy, with AI having more of a role, which sits at odds with how I see it as being a tool of like to kind of enhance creativity. But really interesting to see this coming up in this survey, and more concerns about deepening social economic divides, fake news, and regulatory challenges, like all kind of to be expected. So I guess these, like seeing these concerns like reflected back to me after I'm going out and asking people, what do you feel about AI? What are you worried about? They do emphasize the importance of developing these robust networks and social safety nets, and keeping an eye on the bias management and the regulatory aspects of it. So also, the wanting to enhance the humanness. And I think I really like that in Priyanka's presentation, that really getting into the heart of what makes us human, and being able to leverage that rather than just turning everything into like machines and automation. So kind of now pivoting away from the concerns, I asked people, what should we do about it? What do you feel we should do about it? And the first iteration of the survey asked the question, as AI continues to influence various aspects of working community life, basically what policies do you think should be in place? And it was initially just a free text box. People could say what they liked. People didn't know what to say because they don't know. That's kind of what I took from that. They don't know what's available. They don't know how to do this. And I think that's what this research is all about. It's kind of co-creating it with communities and with workers so that we're not just regulating but not putting in measures or support networks in place that are well thought out and human centric. So in the text list on the left of the slide, that's the order that I put the solutions in. I just from my research and from my kind of personal and kind of professional experience, put some ideas in, some things that I'm following, and I've bolded the ones that were really kind of came up again and again. So people want government-funded retraining programs. They want stronger regulations on AI deployment and use. And they want enhanced social safety nets, even if they can't at this point describe what they are. And they want support for alternative economic models, which speaks to my heart because I'm a advocate for degrowth and the wellbeing economy. So these different kind of models. So when I gave people the choice, they chose these things. Some were less popular than others, but I think it just kind of speaks to the importance of being able to co-create these ideas. So that's kind of as far as I got with my research. Earlier this year, I realized that the actual co-creation part of it, the prototyping workshops and going out and kind of using futures methods with people at a time where the opportunity is massive, but the cost of living crisis is also enormous. And I was talking earlier about how Scotland's at this crux where we almost lent fully into well-being economy, but GDP and growth kind of became like more of a pressing policy decision. So we took a bit of a backward step. And I think when people are up against it and they're struggling and there's challenges and nobody's got enough money, when you ask people what they want, I think the easy answer is just more money. But I think if we spent a bit more time delving into this and kind of working with communities, what I'm trying to say is at this point in time and kind of in that journey of AI advancement, I don't think that us as society just generally have the emotional or capacity, even like the emotional skills or the capacity to think about what else we could do. So I think this is about kind of capacity building, engaging imagination, and giving people the space to be able to think about what else is possible in this kind of context. So I'm using my kind of PhD time to map out how to do this, like what next, how to access people, how to invite that kind of conversation and that co-creation part without asking too much of people, because everyone's exhausted, everyone's burnt out. That's kind of what the capitalist system has done to us. And I want to be mindful of that. So my kind of research questions are, how can I develop this social cohesion index so I can map these attitudes towards social safety nets and start to come up with ideas and then start to kind of test them and stress test them with communities. So, and is foresight the way to do it? Is shared visioning a useful method? And how important is creativity and imagination in developing and maintaining these social safety nets? Because on paper, I think it's a great idea, but in practice, if we don't have time and we don't have the resources, it's a very difficult topic to get into. So that is a whistle-stop tour of my research. If you want to take part in the survey, I'd love to include your responses. And you can also, that way you can leave contact details if you want to kind of track this, where I'm taking this research, and happy to connect and also happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you for the important work and research that you're doing. It's definitely interesting to see the social attitudes, and also the to imagine or reimagine the social safety nets in the era of AI. How do you see AI contributing to creating or recreating new social safety nets um, in regards to work, or even just just safety?
I think that I've not tested it out really as such, partly because I want to give credit to the communities that I work with for being able to imagine it themselves. But I also know um, just the way that I've used I know that it thinks more broadly, more widely, more deeply than I can. And so I feel like if we asked it to come up with the solution, I want to think it can do it because it can think through all of the challenges faster than we can. But I also kind of know that there's biases built in. And so I think I'd want to test it out. Funnily enough, I've not actually gone down that route at this point to see how far I can get with its like how you'd map it out. But I also volunteer with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, like the Scottish chapter. And so the awkward tension is that you can come up with these ideas, but if you then take them to a policymaker, you start getting all the reasons why you can't do that. And you just immediately run into the barriers. So I think that's kind of why I'm looking at doing this at a community level and kind of that ground up, taking it to the policymakers and decision makers and saying, this is the kind of popular opinion at the moment. This is how we do things. But also something I'm exploring currently in my I'm just kind of doing the literature review, but wondering like why aren't communities the decision makers? Like why do we have to take it to a decision maker somewhere else to make a decision for us? So even just questioning the institutions can is a bit of a thought experiment. Um, but yeah, I see AI as being able to play this. I can't think of the term off the top of my head, but just an excellent adjudicator with more skills, more knowledge, more experience than anyone, even a panel could have, really, to be honest. So huge potential.
Do we have questions for Alex? So, Alex, so what prompted your research in related to the future, to redefining work and social attitudes? How did you start this project?
It's quite a personal story, and I did actually mean to talk about this a little bit, but it's a great question, and I alluded to it with the kind of neurodivergence, but just having faced barriers in the workplace and faced challenges that I didn't really understand at the time. Having hindsight has been excellent to go back and look at it. Like my undergraduate degree was law, then I did environmental science masters. So I've got this career that's really broad and truly interdisciplinary, and I can use it to my advantage. But I also know that comes from a place where of struggle, of like struggling to find where I belonged in the world, in the workplace, in a community. So always kind of having that outsider feeling. And so what really striving for inclusivity and belonging, but not really fully until recently kind of understanding why that was such a strong driver. So a strong advocate for worker protections, and kind of not forcing people to work. I don't know how this is in other parts of the world, but in the UK, worklessness, as we call it, like is a sin, basically. Like we need to get people back into work. We need to figure out how to make people work. And I kind of understand the kind of broader context of why that's important for capitalism. And Joseph was talking about that a little bit as well, but kind of really, it's really gnarly how capitalism relies on inequality and relies on keeping workers underpaid. So they keep striving, and that kind of, it turns the cogs. And so we've got this culture and we've kind of internalized it as well. So if you don't if you're not aware of it, it might just be happening anyway because it's part of social conditioning. But you're supposed to work, you're supposed to be a good functioning member of society. But maybe, maybe I'm fortunate I've been able to work, but I think it's 2/3 of autistic people aren't in work and can't work. And I understand why that's so difficult. And disability, or any kind of life experience or life situation that means that working is tricky for you. Maybe you've got caring responsibilities. It puts this pressure on the person and a kind of a burden. And you feel like a burden if you're not working, but how can you work? Like all of these kind of mental health challenges as well. So long story short, I really just would like universal basic income to be accepted and implemented, but I'm trying to build the rationale around why it's so important so that we don't get this kind of forced to work or being forced into jobs that aren't high quality jobs.
So in your view, once the artificial intelligence starts taking on a lot of the tasks that kind of keep people busy, a lot of the work is busy work, a lot of the work can really be taken out of the way with AI. Do you think that will also help remove the stigma around not working and maybe really lead faster to a UBI and get people to choose whether they want to work or not, and maybe create in different ways or just live their lives in different ways?
I want that to be the case. That's the kind of like, that's the optimist in me wants that. But I also know that when I ask people, and I think a lot of work around policy is done by just asking people about their lived experience. But I'm kind of interested in acknowledging and holding space for someone's lived experience, but taking them out of that into an imagination space and asking for them, kind of engaging there with what's possible, because I feel like we'd get different outcomes. And I think at that point, when we've kind of at a kind of societal level, being able to play with resilience and those kind of like empathy, like civic skills as well, like listening, like being able to hear different viewpoints that you don't agree with and not just fall apart. I think there's a lot of skills building that we need to do in order to be in a place where UBI, or it doesn't even have to necessarily be that. I like to call it now just a pension, but for anybody. Like you don't have to retire to get your pension. It's just a pension. I like the idea, or superannuation, I think in Australia. I'm not up with all the different terms for it, but it's such a mindset shift and I don't know if we're ready for it. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at is I love what's possible. And I love the work that's being done, everything that Priyanka said and the work that she's doing, I'm so here for. But I also think that there's like a mindset shift as well where we have to kind of prepare ourselves for the change, because I'm just not sure we're there yet. And I can see that in the answers that I get, where people are like, oh, no, it's scary. A lot of fear.
Yeah, so it seems like it's been a recurrent theme among all the speakers talking about the necessary mindset shift when it comes to, because we're really redefining everything. We're redefining our own perception of of work. We're redefining our perception of education, employment, environment, even policy, business. So it's it's a time where I believe ethics and philosophy become more relevant than ever, and when we're in that point of reshaping the world with the help of AI and AI tools to get to a point of creating maybe more fairness, if
Yeah.
we do the right things, of course.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the dream. Yeah,
Uh,
I remember reading a stat that said Microsoft had done some research that said it was like 80 or 90% of people feel that AI helps them be more creative, so they enjoy their roles more, they enjoy their jobs more. but I'm just, and my survey is so small at this point, but I'm just not really seeing that. And I'm not sure where, but like the education piece is massive. Like this isn't just a future of work question, this is a future of education, because if we just keep trying to prepare people for, you know, our students and our next generation for a future that just doesn't, we can't even comprehend it, it's tricky from an ethics and a just fairness point of view.
Thank you so much.